For more than 45 years, the dynamic, horn-driven sounds of Earth, Wind & Fire has inspired generations. Tonight, the music world is mourning the loss of its leader, Maurice White. As a composer and the man who popularized the African thumb piano, many are saying we lost a musical genius. Byron Scott has the story.
They are the mighty elements of the universe: Earth, Wind, and Fire. 9 talented musicians who could lay a groove like no other. Theirs was a seasoned mix of Afro-Cuban, R&B, gospel, folk art music.
Earth, Wind & Fire came out of a need.
On Wednesday night, their founder, leader, and visionary, Maurice White, passed away after a long bout with Parkinson's disease.
You can feel free to call me if you would like to hear an Earth, Wind & Fire song as well.
Phone lines were busy at WHUR's Tracina Gray in the Midday show as fans called in to share their memories of Maurice White.
Of course, the initial reaction is shock. And then the memories started just flowing, all the Earth, Wind & Fire memories. Anytime you have music that was created many years ago, and still when you hear it today, it feels brand new. You can always get something from it. That's genius.
White was born on December 19, 1941 in Memphis, Tennessee, the home of the blues. His plan was to become a medical doctor like his dad, that is, until he sat behind the drum set. Life was never the same.
So I had a chance to participate in all different types of music.
In the 1960s, he was a session drummer with Chess Records, where he played with Ramsey Lewis, Etta James, Muddy Waters, Buddy Guy, and Sonny Stitt, to name a few.
When you think of Earth, Wind & Fire, when you think of Maurice White, you think of music. You think of a legacy.
In 1969, White moved to L.A. and formed a band called the Salty Peppers, which had limited success. Earth, Wind & Fire, which was taken from White's astrological chart, was assembled in 1971. But with the exception of his brother, bassist Verdine White, the band members were switched out for younger cats, and that's when things really started to happen. The group has sold more than 90 million albums. Their hits include Kalimba Story, Reasons, and Get Away. They wrote the soundtrack for 2 movies, including the 1975 film That's the Way of the World, which featured the song that put them into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2000.
I remember when I went to my very first Earth, Wind & Fire concert, I remember exactly what I wore at that concert. I was a teenager, and the excitement was in the air. I mean, it's just amazing.
The band filled concert halls. These are pictures I took on July 16, 1976, at the Nassau Coliseum on Long Island. White stopped touring with the band in the mid-90s, but he continued to work behind the scenes, making sure the Earth, Wind & Fire sound maintained his guiding light.
Break it all down. All right, y'all. Right here, we're talking about groove personified.
Maurice White was 74 years old. Byron Scott, CTV News.
A growing number of consumers want to know the source of the foods they eat. Unfortunately, Congress recently took action to make it almost impossible to identify where their meats are coming from. Byron Scott shows us a local farm and talks with the operators about why they think Congress made a bad move.
P.A. Bowen Farmstead in Brandywine has been farmland since 1665.
We have pigs, we have dairy cows, we make cheese here, and we have poultry, so we sell eggs and chicken and turkeys.
Sally Fallon Morell, author of the book Nourishing Traditions, bought the farm with her husband in 2009.
This farm is a dream come true for me.
This is not a factory farm. Animals have space to move about freely. What TV cannot convey is the ubiquitous farm odor, or lack thereof.
It's the way we manage the farm. It's largely part of the whole rotational grazing. We're not having a buildup of manure and waste that will just ferment and stink up the whole neighborhood.
And since we are what we eat eats too, feed matters. Cows are grass-fed. Other animals eat non-GMO, soy-free, corn-free grains.
The public more and more wants to know where their food comes from.
It used to be easy for consumers to know where their meat came from. Now, under law, producers of fresh cuts of meat had to label where that meat was born, where it was raised, and where it was slaughtered. But that law was repealed by Congress at the end of last year, and now consumers are, in large part, left in the dark.
I believe it's important for everyone to know where their food comes from, or to at least have a choice.
Congress recently repealed the law under pressure from WTO members, Canada and Mexico.
It's the same kind of pushback against labeling of genetically modified organisms, of labeling MSG in the food, which is something else we'd like to see happen.
Ironically, the move helps small niche farms, even though the product is a bit pricey for many consumers.
We are not, we have no subsidies, and none of our grain is subsidized. You know, our food reflects the real costs of food, and it is unfortunate that it is more expensive.
Morell says she will continue to fight for food labeling because people are better off with more information, not less. Until then, many U.S. consumers will, in some measure, be eating mystery meat. In Brandywine, Byron Scott, CTV News.
And the farmstead sells its food on site as well as at the Annapolis Farmers Market. A partner in a Prince George's golf course. Jimmy Garvin says the game gave him the skills to deal with the ups and downs of life, and now he's passing it on to the younger generation. Byron Scott has the story.
There are more than 19,000 golf courses in the United States.
There are only 4 African-American owned golf courses in the country. It's more about fun for me now than anything else.
58-year-old Jimmy Garvin is part owner of one of those 4, the Malton Golf Course in Upper Marlboro.
Oh, she ran over the green.
Garvin, who gets out on the greens daily, says his is a life of survival. Born in southern Florida, he says it wasn't easy.
Growing up in poverty down in South Florida, living in, 2-room shack, no running water, no indoor toilet. My mom could not take care of us. My dad had passed away at 14. He was a logger.
When it became clear his mother could not care for him, his godmother, Florence Jelks, took him in.
She was the assistant principal at the high school. So once I moved in with her, I've now begun to have 3 hots in the cot, if you will.
Garvin won a baseball scholarship to Howard University for pitching. His scholarship would run out, though, before he graduated, but it's also where his coach, Chuck Hinton, introduced him to golf, the game that would change his life.
Each morning he would get up and lead a team to go somewhere. I didn't know where he was going. So one day I decided to ask him, Coach, where are you going? He said, I'm going to the golf course. I asked him, could I tag along? He said, yes, you can, but you got to learn to play golf.
Garvin chronicled his life in the book, Legacy of a Common Man. The walk was uphill.
And I think it's important that I share that in the book with those children who are out there who are faced with some situation they think they can't get out of. But it takes hard work and dedication.
There would be another dip and comeback in Garvin's life. Several years ago, he faced a federal indictment for a crime committed by a business associate he says he knew nothing about.
I was found guilty.
And what happened at that point?
Didn't serve any time. I was given probation. 3 years probation and 80 hours community service.
Garvin and his partners, HWV Enterprises, took over and opened the Marlton in April of this year. He also runs Jimmy Garvin Legacy Foundation.
And the foundation is in place to help kids with academic support, K through 12. We have a learning center where kids come in to look at math, English, and science. We also have a travel aspect where we take the kids to the Bahamas, St. Lucia, and all the states in the United States to compete in golf. Now, I felt that was important because most of our kids, once they leave home for the first time to enter college, don't know how to build relationships, don't know how to network. So I felt it was important to take the kids out of their environment into a strange environment so that now they have to learn to meet people and understand how relationships work.
And Garvin, who went back to Howard and got his degree in 2008, says his foundation has helped several hundred children ages 7 through 17.